Oops.
Miriam, did we both hit record?
No, you did.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, welcome to the Mad Crib Theology podcast. It's so lovely to be here today with you. And we have two guests joining us today, Corey and Laura. And so we just wanted to say a quick announcement for our listeners. Just our regular call for content for the fall issue of the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health, and Disability. If you have anything kicking around that you think you might want to put out in the world, like art, stories, a paper maybe that you've been working on, a chapter, anything, or if there's something that you really want to sort of think about, like an argument that you want to kind of get out there or have us think up through with you, please do submit it. If you have any ideas, you can always email us. We'd be happy to share that with share a conversation with you. We're especially interested in some pieces for our pedagogy and praxis section. We really want to try to beef that up a little bit. So if there's anything that you have that you think might be a good fit, please do get in touch with us or submit. You can submit at the journal's website.
And today we're so delighted to feature two of our contributors, Corey and Laura. And before we have more one-on-one conversations, we'd invite you both to introduce yourself. So, Laura, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura. I am in Virginia. I'm a Master's of Arts student in seminary right now, finishing up my program. And I live with a physical disability that I was born with. And that informs a lot of the way I approach theology and life and just the way I do my writing and process my experiences. And I hope to bring awareness to all of that for other people as I share my experiences.
Awesome, thank Laura.
Mhm.
I've read your book before, so I'm delighted to meet you.
Ooh, thanks.
And Corey, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, my name's Corey. I live in Fergus, Ontario, just a little bit northwest of Toronto. I'm currently a pastor and work with in some of the group homes here in our community as well. And I'm a student at McMaster Divinity College. So that's sort of the mix of where I'm at and kind of what I'm doing day to day now.
Awesome, we're excited for our conversation. Let's forward over to Amy.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Does Fergus have a lot of group homes?
Um, yeah, within different agencies and sort of
Mm.
service agencies, there's a few, three different ones that I work in locally.
Mhm.
But there's also other agencies that have different homes and gathering areas. So yeah, and we're
Oh,
right
it's
near
fascinating.
Guelph, which has a bunch more kind of closer to the city.
Yeah, I like in my mind, like I just think of, I mean, since Ontario's been growing, like everyone, I feel like everyone's kind of like moving out from the epicenter of Toronto. I can imagine that there's more need for things like that in Fergus because in my mind it's like it's still kind of small, but I guess that's changed since I was a kid.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun. It's growing.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool.
definitely bigger than when I moved here
Yeah,
Yeah,
10 years ago. It's maybe
yeah.
not quite double the size, but it's close. It's yeah,
Ah, that's cool.
absolutely,
Oh,
yeah.
that's great. Well, so good you can do that for the community. All right, so for today we're gonna get started with Laura. sharing some about her piece that she wrote for the journal. So, Laura, would you be able to just briefly summarize the article that you wrote for the journal?
Sure. The title of it is Returning to the Roots of Our Humanity and Exploration of Wholeness Through the Lens of Holistic Health. And I was just exploring a lot of my journey through finding wholeness as I wrestled with disability, even though I was born with it. It took me a while to get to the point of just wrestling through all the dynamics of life with a disability. And so I started doing that. And then on top of that, I developed invisible limits with a thyroid disease. And that also just complicated my experience and probably pushed me to wrestle with it even more so because I had these complicated layers. And on top of that, there's other things I developed as far as some post-traumatic stress symptoms. So I was just living at this intersection and I wanted to understand, like, what does it mean to be whole in this intersection? And as I interacted with different people as far as medical doctors or friends that I was meeting the first time, those questions were just kind of in my mind. So this piece explores my journey to wrestle with my embodied experience as I worked with my counselor and a functional medicine doctor, and just wanted to capture like what Jesus, like how he is a model for us to follow into what I look at as holistic health and caring for the wholeness of who we are as humans.
Thanks so much, Laura. It's fairly often that um I experience, and I've heard others share, that these burdens come out of a personal need to struggle with something, or yeah, or figure out what we think about things and theologies.
Yes, I think I was just trying to find meaning into what I was experiencing,
Yeah,
to find the language for it as well, so that I can understand it in order to explain it to other people if I feel called to speak into that area.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then your article, you came up, you presented ideas on holistic health,
hmm
holistic care, and we wondered if you might speak about these.
Sure. Yeah. So in the article, I talk about 3 key commitments that are a part of holistic health, and I named them as holistic health teaches us to honor the wholeness of our humanity. And this reminds us that we were created as whole beings. And then the second part is holistic health teaches us to embrace the fullness of our experience. And this points to what Jesus calls the abundant life. And for that, I think of the verse where he talks about in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. So there's this sense that everything is not going to be happy all the time or joyful in the sense of what culture might want us to think, because there's going to be hard things, times of suffering. But in the midst of that suffering, joy can be found. Sorry, that was like a side note. I'll come back to that in a minute. And then, so the third aspect of holistic health is holistic health teaches us to care for our whole selves. And through this process, I see it as deepening our love of God and our neighbor. Because when we're taking care of ourselves, we can like be more present to other people as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks so much, Laura. I
Sure.
like how you explained that in the article, and um how how you broke it down for everyone. So thank you. We were intrigued about part of it of what you were sharing when you were talking about meeting new people, especially when you meet medical professionals who often or who usually meet us and have there's a bit of a power imbalance there with them sort of quote unquote knowing everything and us not really knowing anything. So we were just wondering if you could talk to us about what questions were on your mind or usually on your mind when you meet new people, and especially when you meet we had in brackets so-called medical professionals. So would you be able to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. I can speak first to when I'm meeting like new friends. Sometimes I wonder like if they're like, what are they wondering about my disability? Because I usually am in a wheelchair. And so there's like automatic assumptions that can be happening. And I also wonder as far as if I'm going to spend time with them outside of, say, a church service or something, like how is my comfort level for asking them if I need a drink of water or something even more involved as far as physically assisting me. So I'm processing my own sense of trust for this new person that I've encountered and how they are receiving me as a whole person or just a part of a person, just kind of like registering all of those nonverbal things that are going on. And then as far as the medical professionals or people I meet in the healthcare system, I think that one really got highlighted when I was going through my thyroid disease journey. And when that was beginning, it took about 8 or so months to get doctors to come on board and believe what I was sharing. And some of that was just encountering thyroid disease brings up subjective experiences that aren't always measured objectively by a doctor. And so it could be hard to describe my internal experience. So I had to like over time develop an argument per se and evidence for what I was experiencing and feeling. And like as far as family history with thyroid disease. And I encountered some doctors that were new to me that automatically wanted to attribute,
Right.
for example, my thyroid disease to my disability. And I thought this is completely different and felt invalidating or dismissive. So I did not return to that doctor. I kept seeking out other ones that would provide space for listening and compassion and just hearing my story in a way that made me feel like this person wants to help care for me and help me to get back to a sense of health because I was in a state of unhealth. And so my questions were basically like, am I going to be heard by this doctor? Are they just going to look at my disability? Are they going to interpret lab work differently or attribute it to something that is unrelated? I don't know. So all of those things really got stirred up and helped me to advocate a lot more within the healthcare system for myself. So it was an interesting journey because I would live with my disability my whole life, but in a lot of ways, my thyroid disease taught me another level of finding my voice.
Right. And yeah, I wonder am I trying to say. And there are stories about women especially not being believed by medical professionals. I know I've heard stories of parents with disabled children who will not believe about what they say about their child. So I know it's a common thing, but do you have advice from what you learned and experienced for other disabled people who might be facing similar barriers in their health care system?
Yeah, I can think of some points there. I think for one, I've just learned to go into medical appointments with notes that are helpful, like what I feel is important for the appointment, like what I want to be addressed or discussed. And sometimes that means, like with my functional medicine doctor, I have access to sending messages between appointments, and that's been a really helpful space because sometimes I process things a little bit slower. So I hear something in a meeting or an appointment, and I think, okay, well, I need to take some time and just process that on my own. And then I typically have a follow-up question or thought. So having that access is helpful. So finding out if your doctors have that type of resource as far as, can I communicate with you between appointments, or just finding the top type of place that offers that. And also outside of appointments, just having friends with disabilities or similar experiences where you can have that sense of solidarity in place where you can process the more difficult experiences if you're not being heard or validated, but you can go to your friend in those places of support and community, and they can offer that to you so that you can be like, okay, this makes sense now, and I'm not alone in this. And now I know how to move forward.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, that's so cool. Or I was thinking when you were talking, because I'm one of those unlucky people who gets really like bad, like chronic migraines. So I like intermittently see a pain doctor. And like I was so happy when because if there are migraine people out there listening, you know what this is like, I'm sure. It's like there's like a huge list of meds that you kind of start at the top and you try all of them to see what works, what does your brain need. And so as we're moving through some of these meds, well, you know, when I was under his care, I still am, I don't see him as much anymore, thank God. But like I had some bad side effects to one of the medications, and I remember like just calling and telling like the reception, like, hey, I'm not feeling good, is it okay if I just like go off? And he called me back in like 10 minutes. And I was like, this is, oh my God, I've never had this before where a doctor was like so like available.
Yes.
So it's just it's so lovely that you also were able to get to send those messages in between. And just like thinking about how much that can help us with our like the relationships we have with medical professionals, like we feel like they really care and they're like attentive to our needs. So I remember he called me
Yeah.
on my cell phone. I was downtown Toronto and I was like, hello. And he's like, Amy, are you okay? He's like, it's okay, go off, I don't want you to feel sick. And I was like, this is so nice. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's so nice when the system has room for that kind of those kind of things to happen.
Yeah, that reminds me of my endocrinologist as well, because I work with him as well. And we reached a
Yeah.
place where sometimes it's more important for me to not be on the thyroid medicine because the side effects are getting too much for my body, and just having doctors to honor the sensitivities or how my body or your body is responding to medication, it makes a difference to say like, okay, I just need a break and let's
Yeah.
just let me focus on something else at the moment, because right now I value having less brain fog because sometimes medicine creates brain fog that's different than thyroid disease.
Yeah, I have a whole story about one medication that made my hand stop working.
Oh,
It
no.
was antidepressant, but it affected my one working hand,
Oh,
but the doctors didn't believe that that there was a correlation. So one day the pharmacist said, actually this might be related. So it took 6 months or a year for me to figure that out and come off the med. So, I don't know why I said that, but meds can be tricky, and doctors may not always believe that antidepressant effects, physical movement too. So our final question is one you actually posed to the readers of your article. So we thought we felt like you had some wisdom to share on that too. So how does this holistic theology reflect the nature of the Trinity?
Yeah. I think first of all, as the Trinity, we remember like God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are in a relationship with each other, and it's interdependent on each of the three parts of the Trinity. And in different scriptures, God is called like the Father of compassion, and Jesus is named Wonderful Counselor, for example. And then the Holy Spirit comes to us as the advocate. So these different roles and different aspects to their nature, but as like one interdependent being, there's this holistic nature to the Trinity. And I think even as we look at Jesus, because he came to earth, but he still reflects God. So in that we see more of God's character, as far as Jesus has instances where he's lamenting or he's weeping with friends, or he's taking time away from the crowd to choose solitude and prayer time with his Father. He gets hungry, he gets angry, he gets he expresses love to his friends and loved ones. So all of these things just really reflect a holistic nature that exists with God as his character, because Jesus is part of his character, the Holy Spirit is part of his character. And that can also just teach us as human beings who are his image bearers, like how we need to take care of ourselves, whether it's physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health, because they're all interrelated. And if we want to image God and follow Jesus in this way, like all of these aspects are important.
Yeah, thanks so much, Laura. That's so helpful. I was thinking when you were talking like about how Jesus went away so much to like be alone, and maybe he was an introvert. You know, I'm an introvert, so I thought, maybe he's an introvert. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's a side thought. All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your sharing today about your article, and
Yeah.
that we're so glad you were able to be a part of the issue of the journal.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're gonna now take some time to talk to Corey about your article, Corey. So would you mind just briefly describing your article for us? What is it about?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Laura, for sharing all your insights prior. That was really fascinating. That was really good. So my article is it's an autoethnography that I originally wrote during my Doctor of Ministry studies at Tyndale University in Toronto. And in it, I'm critically reflecting on my journey through a significant life transition that was coinciding with my diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder. So I'm exploring themes of identity, place, displacement, and ultimately kind of landing towards this theme of hospitality and the sense of home that I was discovering often in very surprising places. And I used autoethnography as a research methodology, partly because of it's what I find to be its strength and disability theology. It allows storytelling alongside sort of this cultural commentary, so we can sort of make sense of our own experiences, but also offer this critical lens into the social and cultural contexts that we live in. So as I was sort of exploring my struggles with otherness and this sometimes experience of not fitting into the world, I was also able to give sort of a critical lens towards the contexts around me, and sort of using the some of the models of disability studies, like the social model and cultural model. I was able to sort of point to the collective need of social transformation, and ultimately, including in the church. And I'll say, like, because so much of my experience had this embodied spatial quality to it. The article, I was able to bring in some exploration on the significance of place, so sort of physical, relational, embodied space, and comment on our need for maybe rethinking place as a context where we can be received and known. To use, I didn't use this in the article, but philosopher Hannah Arendt talks about places for appearing, and being able to show up as we are, not necessarily as others would prefer us to be. So that theme of hospitality, of home, of finding places to appear, really became a core theme in the autoethnography that I wrote. So that's kind of an overview. My experiences of life transitions and displacement, my coming to terms with my diagnosis, and then how this all works in with the cultural situation I lived in.
Yeah, that really reminds me of Mary McQuinton Ferguson's book,
Yeah,
and he uses places to appear as well.
that was my introduction to that theme. I think it's Places of Redemption is her book, perhaps.
Yeah,
Yeah, brilliant book. That was a really, really good read.
yeah, yeah. Your article, and the impetus, as you said, came out of receiving an autism diagnosis. So can you share with our listeners some of that experience?
Yeah, yeah, it was a bit of a slow process and a late diagnosis in my life. I'm 38 now. I was 35, 36 at the time, I think. But yeah, the diagnosis came as a tremendous gift. And I think that seems to resonate with a lot of adults with these sort of late diagnoses of neurodiversity. Uh, First of all, it was just a big, like, aha moment. Like, oh, this makes total sense. Like, you're not just being difficult, which sometimes I've heard in my life. You're not just being different. There's a reason why you experience the world in this way. And it came at a really pivotal time. Like literally, and this is just, I'm sure, God's weaving together of circumstance. It was to the day that this major life transition was beginning for me. So the diagnosis even gave me some language and frameworks for understanding myself, my loss of people and rhythm and place that I was experiencing. And I can only speak for myself, but sometimes living with what we might call, again, like an invisible disability can be quite complex. Like, people see me and think, oh, you're just like the rest of us. You're just fine. And then they can tend to misread when I do act or respond differently to normal situations. And a lot of my life, I sometimes just felt like a bit of a dud. I would struggle to sit in a restaurant, to engage conversations in foyers full of people. I'm a pastor. But somehow having that formal diagnosis for me gave me some reassurance, like it's okay to not be okay always. And the people that I do share the diagnosis with are often very sweet. They start to understand when I have to, put in my earbuds or duck out of a room or cover my eyes if lights turn on, and I think they really know this is Corey, not trying to be difficult, but just trying to be here as best as possible.
Yeah.
So it came as a gift, and I might add, just and I mean this with all sincerity. My diagnosis has afforded me something of kind of a street cred when I'm doing my research and writing. Not that we need to be autistic to say something about autism, but it certainly helps when we have academics speaking and writing from within the context. There's that slogan, nothing about us without us. There's something to that. It's good that we have voices from within a community speaking about that community. So all in all, it was a tremendous gift for me.
Yeah, that's a major thing that I know Amy and I agree on about voices from within communities doing our own theology.
Such a good way to put it. Love that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I like too what you were saying about having street cred too, because yeah, I remember maybe like 10 years ago or something, I read that book Who Can Speak. I can't remember does anybody know the author's name?
It's on myself, but
Yeah, if we can figure out the author's name, we'll link it below. But I remember reading that and thinking like, you know, it is important that we have our own theologies. And it's important that we're able to create spaces too where we can also not know the answers sometimes. Like sometimes like I feel like I'm just kind of flailing around, like I don't know what the theology is yet, but we're creating spaces where we're like slowly writing it, and maybe sometimes they're shitty, they're not perfect, but we're still trying. And hopefully that's like hopefully the journal's contributing to that kind of space. Did you find it,
I
Miriam?
say,
Oh, sorry.
the book is co-authored by Ruth and Wegman.
Okay, all right. And it was like it's from the 90s, is that right? Am I
Yeah,
thinking of it right?
it's quite
A bit older.
it's older. Not that the 90s were a long ago, but
Yeah. Sorry, Corey, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to make a comment, and this kind of riffs off of something Laura said a bit earlier that I thought was brilliant. There's also something of almost maybe a slowness to our theology that is kind of beautiful. Like when you talked, Laura, about that idea of needing to process and sometimes coming to a idea days later, there's something about that just being able to. So often I just need a little bit more time to process. I just need a little bit more time to think about what was said or done before I anyway. And there's something about maybe voices from within the community that our theology might just develop a little, and like you said, Amy, maybe a little messier at times or incomplete, but there's something really beautiful about that. So Yeah.
We often talk about wedding and crib time, which I can get frustrated about, but I also think it's quite beautiful too.
Mhm.
Yeah, Corey. So we talked a little bit earlier about this idea of place. So we wanted to ask you about your writing about home in your piece. So where have you found home in places that you were least expecting?
Yeah. So in the autoethnography, I refer primarily to the local public schools. And the school system became a very surprising but wonderful part of my story for the better part of a year. I was invited to be an education assistant, which I have absolutely no background or training in. So very surprising. But I was suddenly surrounded by people who, like me, needed a little, say, extra time, a little slowness, a quiet place, a listening ear. And I suppose we could be sort of different together. That was that was kind of the first surprising place. But then almost to the day when my role at the public school was ending, I was also invited to join a social service team here in Wellington County. And for the better part of 2 years, until very recently, I spent just day after day with so many people who welcomed me into their homes, often, broken or, messy as their situations were, or people who sat with me next to their, you know, forest campouts or park benches where they were living, and all of these people became or welcomed me into a sort of home
Mm.
experience. And I always think that's so ironic that so often the homeless were the people that came like a home for me. The people that were very unfit were the people that made a space for me to fit. And I think that has a lot to do with just the vulnerability, what we might call a weakness, but their remarkable just generosity, hospitality. Offering me a granola bar, a bottle of water out of what little they had, and I imagine it's probably something similar to what someone like Henry Nouwen might have felt when he did his sort of downward move into the L'Arche Daybreak program, or what Thomas Reynolds talks about in Vulnerable Communion, when he talks about just this mutual vulnerability that creates a connection, a sense of home among us. And he says, there's something oddly uh, there's something strong in weakness. There's something useful in being of no use. There's something communal about this vulnerability. And it's still something to this day where I find when I go into the group homes week by week, there's just often this sense of being at home with these individuals. And I don't have a big theory or explanation for that. It just happens when I engage vulnerability and can be welcomed as a vulnerable person in return, that I tend to feel at home there. The city streets, back forests, kindergarten carpets, those are the places. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Corey, for sharing. We also wanted to hear about your doctoral work you're doing now and how that work is going for you.
Right.
So I know that question that should not be asked.
How it's going?
So, so you can push back against us, but in case you want to talk about it, we'd be
Yeah,
happy
no,
to hear.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I wrapped up my my Doctor of Ministry at Tyndale University last May, and this is again where this autoethnography was sort of situated in that. Right now, I'm doing a PhD at Master Divinity in Hamilton, working with a wonderful supervisor, Dr. Phil Zilla. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so I'm starting to dial into some of these intersections of human geography, critical spatiality, and disability theology. So sort of a further dive into what I talk about in autoethnography, a bit how our experience of place and lived environments intersects with disability theology. And so as far as how it's going, like, yeah, it's going,
It's
it's
happening.
happening, whether, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, it's funny because one of the main sort of diagnostic criteria that the psychologist had zeroed in on years ago when I got diagnosed was what she called my fixation on words, on defining questions before I could answer them, all these kind of. So it's funny that what sometimes drives people up the wall about me, you know, can you define that word? And do you know what that word actually means? And whatever, before I can engage. Uh, that's that's one of the it's one of the places where it pays off for me as in
For
academia.
sure.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of a gift. But then as a practical theologian, um, I'm so thankful that my work in the academy intersects so much with my work in the sort of like cultural horizon that I live in. Um, and so it is sort of beautifully meshing together. So that's where I'm at now. If you ask me a year from now, I'll maybe have more to say about all that, though.
Awesome. We'll look forward to yeah, hearing more about your work in the coming years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. We usually at this point in the podcast, we just pause to see if you have any questions or ponderings for each other, or if you want to make any comments or give some words of encouragement to each other. So, Laura, I wonder if you have anything that you might want to ask Corey or say to Corey.
Yeah, I read our article earlier today just so I could be familiar with it, and it struck me the theme of home and finding those places where you belong. I think it's a common struggle sometimes for people with disabilities, so I resonated with the way you wrote it and spoke about finding home in places that were not always the church places, and that can just expand the way we also think about the church and how it's not just one particular building. And so
Mhm.
that is helpful to consider, and just like how we leave church spaces and we go out in the world and do life, or yeah, live our own embodied lives, and finding home, yeah, is an important theme. So thank you for sharing your story and experience, and keep
Absolutely.
writing and working.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and Corey, do you have
You
any
can,
ponderings for Laura?
yeah, no, I mean, such a fascinating reminder, and that the whole piece of holistic health and the interpersonal mixed with the embodied and yeah, I'm just fascinated when I hear those kind of very, very vulnerable, real stories that like yours that we it helps me to continue sort of expanding my view of the disability, say, experience beyond just sort of a very isolated, personal thing, but it's this interpersonal, it's this embodied. It involves storytelling, it involves listening, it involves all this, and the Trinitarian framework for that is just such a wonderful way of helping frame and engage. So no, I thank you for challenging me and showing me something new about that. It's like when someone brings up a story from their own life, it's always sort of new. It's always something new because it's your experience. And no, that was just a very wonderful reminder for me today. So I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both so very much for sharing today, for participating in the storytelling and the hearing of stories. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. We look forward to further conversations with you both.